All right. So I have gotten a little bit sick and I need something to pass the time. So, what better to do than work on some LeetCode problems and try to up our programming skills? I thought this would be a fun little activity. I'm just going to work through the problems starting with number one and just keep going from there. Um, if you are new to programming, this could be a good way for you to learn. And if you are not new with programming, then a good way for you to learn would be by telling me what I could do better. So let's start with this one. We have TwoSum. Given an array of integers nums and an integer target, return indices of the two numbers such that they add up to target. You may assume that each input would have exactly one solution, and you may not use the same element twice. You can return the answer in any order. So, for example, we have this array 2, 7, 11, and 15, and the target is 9. Well, the only combination in this array that adds up to 9 is 2 and 7. So we have to return the indices of those. Since these arrays are 0 indexed, it would be 0 and 1, because 0 would point to 2 and 1 would point to 7. All right, so how do we make that happen in the code? I'm just going to work with Python here, but if y'all have any other preference, just let me know. So let's look at an example. Let's scramble around those numbers a little bit. Let's say instead it's 15, 7, 11, and 2. The way I like to think about this is that you have two pointers and you just iterate through the array in a way that allows you to check all the possible combinations. So, for example, we would start by taking the first number, 15. All right. And then we would iterate through the remaining numbers in the array, being 7, 11, and 2. So we'd say, does 15 plus 7 equal 9? And the answer is no. So you keep going. Does 15 plus 11 equal 9? No, so you keep going. And then finally, does 15 plus 2 equal 9? No. So that means that 15 is not involved because none of the other numbers can add to it such that you get 9. All right, so let's say instead that we do, so we're going to iterate from there. We're going to change our first number to be 7. And now, since we have already passed over 15, we can just include 11 and 2. We don't have to worry about 15 anymore. That's gone. He had his chance. So we have 7 plus 11 equal 9. No, so we move on. And then finally, we get the right answer when we say 7 plus 2 equals 9. And then we can just stop the code there. We don't need to check any other combinations because the rule of this problem says that there's only, let's see, yeah, the indices of the two numbers such that they add up to target. You may assume that each input would have only exactly one solution. So you can stop it right there. So what's a good way that we can iterate through two different values at once? Well, it's a pretty simple approach, and it's also not the fastest, but the most digestible way to do it is with a nested for loop. A nested for loop is, a loop being that you pass through a series of operations multiple times. And so a nested loop is you do a series of operations multiple times, and then within that, you do a series of operations multiple times. So in this case, the outer loop, I'm going to get rid of this. The outer loop defines our first number. All right, so for Python, I've been doing a lot of TypeScript lately, so I always get the syntax mixed up. But for Python, we're going to do for I in range um, nums dot length minus 1. All right, now why are we doing the minus 1? Well, so range would be 0, and then it's non-inclusive of num's length. So if we took away this minus 1, then we would iterate through all of the possible indices in the whole array. But we don't need to do that with the outer loop, because by the time we get to the second to last number, we don't need to have the outer loop worry about the last index, because the inner loop will do that for us. So we're going to do for I in range num's length minus 1. Now, the inner loop defines second number. Now, to be specific, we should say index. It's not the number itself, but it's rather where it is in the array. All right, so we can say for j in range nums. Actually, my apologies. The range would only be the numbers left after the first number. So for example, over here we have 2, and then we check 7, 11, and 15. But once we get to 7, we only check 11 and 15, which means that our initial value that we're checking would be I plus 1. And then that can go up to nums.length. So that will stop at the last number in the array. So that's the key of this problem, I believe, is just starting the second loop at this value right here. Because that way you're never checking the same combination twice. You're saying 2, 2 and 7, 2 and 11, 2 and 15, 7 and 11, 7, 15, and then 11 and 15. And then that's as far as you can go. Now, we can just check if those two numbers add up to the target. And if so, we're done. And if not, then what was it then? We just keep going. We're going to say if nums dot, well, if nums I plus nums j equals target, return I j. Okay, and then usually we want to add a value just in case. So -1 is usually a good option, because you can't have a negative indice for a problem like this. So this would be a good way to recognize that there's a problem. Let's see if this works. Ooh, okay. Oh, you know what? I think I mixed up. Yes, absolutely. I've been working a lot of different languages lately, and every single one has a different way of saying what length is. All right, let's try that. There it is. All right. Those are just the initial 3 test cases to make sure that it's all working. Yeah. So this is actually a pretty slow way of going about this, but yeah, that should do it. So yeah, we have our outer loop, and that defines the pointer to the first number. We have our inner loop that defines the pointer to the second number. And then if we ever find the right pair, then we stop right there. Let's submit. And we're done. Okay, so it did pretty good in memory. Not the best in speed. There's some better solutions, but you know, it's just problem 1. We got a long road ahead. But yeah, I appreciate you joining me. And yeah, looking forward to the next one.